The other day I rewatched the Fantastic Four and realised just why I fell in love with superhero movies in the first place. Now recently I've actively been avoiding new Marvel films as it feels more like a chore when watching them than for enjoyment. So why does older superhero films like Fantastic Four feel so much better than the modern ones? Well, let's look into it. Firstly, the story. The story of the Fantastic Four is amazing. It has a great beginning, it has a great middle, it has a great end, and it's thoroughly enjoyable all the way through, and it's easy to follow. Whereas new Marvel films have to tick so many boxes with their stories that basically the story just gets lost and isn't there. And that's why it's not as enjoyable as, say, the Fantastic Four or the older Marvel films that were more focused on the story. The second thing I think, which will seem strange, is the VFX. Now you may be thinking, yes, the VFX of a 2005 film should be way worse than the VFX of a film of today, but I've got to say the VFX in the Fantastic Four are so much better than the VFX that we see in modern Marvel films. And mainly because the VFX artists had time to do their work, but also the Fantastic Four held on to a lot more of practical effects. Anything they could do practically, they did practically, and the CGI was just to help out. But the CGI is fantastic because you can see the time and effort put into it. Whereas in new Marvel films, because they're coming out so often, the VFX is often rushed, and anything that they can do CG, they'll do CG. Whereas practical effects will always be better for the eye, because even with the slightest of CG, your eye can detect that slight difference, and until CG is literally perfect, we'll always be able to tell if it's CG versus practical, so practical is better. And I thought, even though it's 2005, the effects of the Fantastic Four was so much better. My third point, the casting. The casting was done on who was best for the role. It didn't tick an agenda box. Now, most films these days, they have to tick so many diversity boxes, so many inclusion boxes, but it can take away from the story. Sometimes it's better just to have the best person for the role, and the Fantastic Four was cast so well. And it's actually strange when you think that Chris Evans did this and then did Captain America, how different the roles are, but he was fantastic in this film. The casting was perfect, and it wasn't just going for a tick box, it was just who was best for the role and who fit it. Fourthly, the movie was just a movie. It didn't have to fit into this overall MCU, and I think the MCU has grown to a point where it's actually hindering stories and hindering films, whereas the original, the first 23 films, it was perfect. Everything fitted in, and it didn't have to accommodate a story to fit into the MCU as much, and it didn't have to link all these new characters, it didn't have to build in all these plot points, so it was enjoyable. But now it has to build in so many plot points, takes away from the story, and just having a movie where you can just watch a movie, not have to do the homework of seeing all the other MCU films, was just so much more enjoyable, and that's why the Fantastic Four was so much of a better film than a lot of the modern Marvel films. And finally, obviously this probably had a major effect. I loved the Fantastic Four as a kid. Nostalgia had to kick in, and sometimes if you go back and watch the things you watched as a kid, you'll feel nostalgic and just enjoy it more. So that might be a reason why I preferred the Fantastic Four to, say, modern Marvel films. But those are just a few reasons why I think going back and watching some old superhero films will definitely make you re-fall in love with the superhero genre, especially if you've fallen out of love. Things like the Fantastic Four, The Dark Knight, and the first Iron Man film will get you feeling that love for superhero films that we all had as a kid. So those are just my opinions, but what do you guys think? Do you prefer older superhero movies? Do you prefer the modern ones? Let us know in the comments.